Job's done.
Upgrade complete.
Yes, me lord. Job's done.
Allied town is under siege.
Lord. To arms!
Our forces are under
I can't
attack.
believe that we in May already. Can you believe it?
What is it? More work?
More gold is
We
required.
shall not
I'm
falter.
gonna talk to
For the
you guys
silver hand,
about
ready for action.
Yes,
social
me
More
lord.
skills.
lumber is required. More lumber
And,
is required.
like
Our allied town is under
Job's done.
siege.
More work? I can't build
You
that.
know,
Yes, me lord.
they say a lot of guys that
For Lordaeron. For the silver hand.
Forces
chosen
are under attack.
females. They say that a lot of these types
For Lordaeron. Like curse you.
social skills.
Like curse you.
Well,
For the silver hand.
there are guys out there who have good social skills,
Forces are under
but
attack.
the thing is, they're still not being chosen. You can have good
Allied
social
town is
skills
under siege.
and
Our
still be
town
at a
is
deficit.
under siege.
Silver
Me
hand.
lord.
You know, I know they say that, you know, a lot of these dudes don't have good social skills. They don't have good people skills. Some of these dudes communicate very well with people. It's just that when people think that you're a bad looking
The light
person,
is with us.
they're gonna automatically assume negative things about you.
Ready for a like curse.
Απόλαυση είναι όταν η αυθεντική σοκολάτα υγείας Παπλίδη αγκαλιάζει 3 βελούδινες γεύσεις.
Gaza faces dire conditions, famine grips the land, hygiene standards drop, and trauma weighs heavy on every soul. Yet amid these hardships, a glimmer of hope emerges. Our team at
I believe there are a lot of guys who have great social skills. Now, I'm not saying there aren't guys who are socially inept,
Like curse you.
because there are guys who have low social skills. They don't have social skills. They don't understand social cues.
Is under siege.
So I'm not excusing that. But I truly believe that
Like curse you.
social skills have nothing to do with attracting women. Because I'm sure there are some guys out there who are attractive to women. And they don't have the best social skills, but since they look good to women, they get away with being socially
Silver
retarded.
hand. For Lordaeron.
Our allied town is under siege.
For the record,
Aye, my lord.
Orders. Our forces are
I
under
consider
attack.
myself to
On my
have
way.
pretty good
Yes, my
social skills.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if you have good social skills or not. Because when people first meet you, when people look at you, people are making judgments about you. And when people have already made certain judgments about you, and they don't even know you,
Shall not falter.
it's because of your appearance.
Town is under
For Lordaeron.
Like I stated before, people will even judge your level of
Shall not
intelligence
falter.
based on the way that you look physically.
For the silver
So that
hand.
ought to tell you
For
something.
Lordaeron. Like curse you. For the silver hand. For Lordaeron.
Having good social skills is all well and good, but you have to have
What is it? All right.
a platform to express your social skills. And some guys have never been given the platform to even express their social skills, because when you've already been judged by people, when people have already labeled you and stereotyped you out, you're not going to be given a platform to even express your social
Light
skills.
is with us.
You know, because once people have branded you and placed you into a category, you know,
What is it?
whatever good social skills that you may have, you're not going to be able to display those social
For
skills.
Lordaeron. We shall not falter. For the silver hand.
Yes, me lord.
It's good to be a sociable person, and I truly believe that social anxiety comes from being mistreated and being ridiculed. That's what social anxiety comes from. People who've had a lot of positive reinforcement, people who've been treated well,
Like curse you.
What? Our forces are under
they
attack.
don't deal with
Our allied town
they don't deal with
For the silver hand.
social anxiety. You know, social anxiety, all that is just it comes from being treated bad. That's all that comes from. It's just a symptom of being treated bad and being excluded and treated like garbage. That's what social anxiety comes from. There are some guys out there that have good personalities. They have good social skills. But what does having good social skills even matter if you've already been judged and written off by people from the time that they look at you? You know, I feel that it's a lot of guys out there that have great personalities, but them having a great personality, at the end of the day, it's not getting them laid. These women don't care that these men have great personalities. You can have a great personality and you'll still find yourself all alone. So when people say that, you know, a lot of guys are not successful with women because they don't have good social skills. Good social skills come from like you have to exercise a muscle in order to build it. That's how good social skills are cultivated. If you never have been given, like I stated, if you've never been given an opportunity to be sociable, to show, you know, your personality, you know, then you know, that's why some guys may have poor social skills, because they haven't been given the platform to even display their social skills. You know, these types of things right here have to be cultivated. And there are some guys some guys have great social skills, like myself. Some guys have wonderful social skills, but when you've already been judged and ridiculed by people from the time they see you, it doesn't matter if you have a great personality. It doesn't matter if you have great social skills. Because once people have made their judgment about you, there's nothing you can do to deter that. So, you know, that's a myth. And it's a big lie that, you know, guys who, you know, struggle with women are socially inept. Some of these guys may be socially inept, but I'll say 90% of these guys are not socially inept. 90% of these guys have pretty fair social skills. They can talk to people, they can vibe with people. You know, they're not terrible people.
Πάσχα προς τιμή σου. Τώρα έχεις προνομιακό πλάνο δόσεων στο Κοτσόβολο με δώρο 50% των τόκων σε κορυφαία Apple προϊόντα. Βρες το iPhone 15 Pro Max από 44.
It's just that we live in a world where people believe in judging people just by the way that they look. And people will also make a negative judgment about you if you don't think a certain way. If you don't see things a certain way, if you don't have a certain mentality, if you don't have a certain outlook on life, people will make a negative judgment about you because of that as well. But one thing about me, I understand that everybody have their own challenges and everybody have their own problems. I've never been a judgmental person. I've never been the type of person to judge people for how they choose to live, because at the end of the day, you can judge people all you want, but people gonna live their life and they gonna do what they want to do anyhow. So that's why I've never been the person to judge folks. That's why I say this is just one big old lie. Old dudes who are not successful with women have bad social skills. That's not necessarily true. Because I never felt that I had bad social skills. You know, a lot of these guys have great personalities. So that's a lie. When people say, oh, you know, these guys, they're just socially inept. They're just inadequate. They're just awkward. No, it ain't the fact that they awkward. It ain't the fact that they don't have good social skills. It's just that we live in a shallow, sick world where people believe in judging people and writing people off because of superficial things. So, I was thinking to myself, I don't buy that these guys have bad social skills. That's why they've been written off by women. That's not true. Because a guy can have bad social skills. Let's say if he's a hot guy, he can have bad social skills, and women will still screw him, and people will still be receptive to him. Because we live in a world where people judge people by superficial things. So I don't buy that foolishness. Oh, you're not successful with women because you have bad social skills. No, that's not true. It's true for some guys, but most of these dudes, I don't believe they have bad social skills. That's just a cop-out excuse that people like to use to cover up the evil that's going on in this world. But that's been tonight's discussion. We'll be talking to you soon. I'm sure a lot of guys can relate to this. Have a good night.
Upgrade complete.
Hello, and welcome again to the Jolly Heretic Public House on tour. And we are once again in beautiful southern Spain. Look at it, it's amazing. Look at that camera. Isn't it amazing? Look at this view. Look at this view. And there's a pirate ship over in the bay. We're not quite sure what it's doing. It's slightly frightening. And speaking of pirates, I have on this camera a man with a sort of piratey 18th century beard. And this is goes by the name of Date Psych. And he has a very interesting Twitter, Date Psych, in which he looks at evolutionary psychology and all kinds of fascinating stuff to do with the manosphere and how people are sexually selected. Hello, how do you do?
Very good, thank you for having me on.
It's a pleasure to meet you at last. And so what was it that got you into this area of evolutionary psychology and the genetics of relationships and so forth? Why did you become interested in that?
So I began studying personality psychology, research, behavior, cognition, and all that, and I realized personality psychology overlaps a lot with relationships. And of course, relationships, romantic relationships, love, a really fundamental human experience. So a topic that's just very interesting to me. I thought, okay, that's something to look in. And then also seeing how it's a popular topic. There's a lot of people who have kind of a pop psychology or a folk psychology about it. They don't always kind of get it right, but kind of correcting those sorts of things as well.
So what are the sort of things that you have felt the need to correct?
I think certainly there's a lot from evolutionary psychology that has kind of filtered into the manosphere, like you said. So kind of these takes that are perhaps a little bit more nuanced that become very, very black and white. For example, research on the dual mate hypothesis, strategic pluralism. So the idea that we have a dual mating strategy, short-term and long-term mating. But there's a lot of nuance that influences who's going to have a short-term strategy, who's going to have a long-term strategy. But when that kind of gets filtered into popular discourse or pop psychology, I think people make it very, very black and white. It's this or it's that.
So what it fits into a negative perception of women, which is part of the manosphere. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, often it's given a very negative skew, and certainly, facts about human nature are not always positive, so sometimes the negative skew is the truth, but at the same time, yeah, a lot of the time it becomes kind of distorted or even weaponized to portray women negatively, sometimes portray men negatively, but often I think to give men and women also a really negative perception of each other, which of course is not very helpful in romantic relationships, especially if people are trying to date and they want to figure things out, and it's like, well, I hate women, now I hate men. It's not a good attitude.
One of the terms, thinking of that, I've read some of your writings and so forth, and some of your videos, and one of the ones that I was the most interested in was on the issue of female narcissism. Now, this is one of these terms du jour, like autism, which has become very popular over the last decade or so, and it seems quite common for if a woman doesn't like a chap, so he's a narcissist, and vice versa for a man, oh, she's a narcissist. So a female narcissist. And you were looking at the way that female narcissism is quite distinct from male narcissism. So what would be the kind of sign for a person being female narcissist?
So it's interesting because female narcissism may be a little bit more difficult to detect because it's more covert. When we think of narcissism, often if it's diagnosed as narcissistic personality disorder or even subclinical narcissism as a trait narcissism, we tend to think of grandiosity. Often grandiosity is associated with agentic behavior. So, associated with agentic behavior. So, for example, agentic behavior. So, agentic in the sense that kind of individualistic, looking out for one's, having agency. In that sense. Agency, there we go. That's a good way to put it. So, yeah, so it's kind of perhaps an overt or an extreme expression of agency. I'm looking out for myself, I'm going to get it for myself and all that. So it's associated with grandiosity, status seeking, seeking of leadership positions and recognition. But narcissism, when it's expressed in women, doesn't necessarily look like that. It can often be covert narcissism. So, for example, ruining reputations behind the scenes, whereas a male narcissist might be more directly confrontational. A female narcissist might be someone who kind of goes behind backs. Cancellation, for example, could be an expression of female narcissism. The idea like, okay, we're going to ruin someone's reputation.
But if a chap got himself involved with a woman, got himself involved with a female, and she was a narcissist, how would the process of the relationship start to play out? You know, he meets her, how would it be? How can you tell you're dealing with a female narcissist, the naive young member of the manosphere?
Certainly. So, one thing that narcissists have in common, men and women both, is they need a lot of validation, and they're very sensitive to criticism as well. So, I think one of the first signs there is going to be someone who is not able to admit any wrongdoing, or who has a very, very difficult part of wrongdoing, or who's unable to admit kind of nuance in a problem. Like, okay, so you have a conflict with someone. Often, both people have done something in that conflict and it can be resolved. So it's kind of like, okay, I see that I did this, but you did this. We can kind of meet in the middle. A narcissist might be completely incapable of admitting that they've done anything wrong. So it's just like, I didn't do this, you did this, it's 100% your fault. I think that's a pretty big red flag, especially if it's manifesting as a pattern over the relationship. Like, this is someone who just cannot admit that they ever did anything wrong. That's probably going to be a big sign.
Well, I think there was quite a strong link between narcissism and borderline personality. So, how would that manifest if you were getting into a relationship? What would it be like to be in a relationship with a woman that has borderline personality? You meet her, what's it going to be like? How's it going to sort of develop as well?
Yeah, so that's interesting because we see a sex difference in narcissism where, you know, they say men are diagnosed about twice the rate of women, and that might be the case because some incidences of female narcissism could be misdiagnosed as borderline personality disorder. But kind of the hallmark of borderline personality disorder is kind of a shift between what's often called love bombing. So extreme intensity in the relationship. It seems like this person really loves me. They're really into me. This is very, very passionate. And then it flips, it switches and says, okay, now this person hates me. They're throwing their shoe at me. They're angry. They're screaming all the time. And so it's kind of this back and forth. And that's often what you'll see in kind of this borderline. Or alternately, it can go from kind of things are good, things are intense, they're exciting, and then all of a sudden things are bad and they're depressed. And this person is really, really withdrawn. That could also be kind of an expression. Borderline personality disorder.
Right, so borderline personality will start off by loving you and making you feel like you're amazing. You're her favourite person. She's obsessed with you. Is that fair enough?
Exactly, yeah. And the narcissist might do that also, but as a deliberate strategy. They might know, like, okay, I can flatter them, I can do this, I can show them, you know, this kind of affection and attention to make them like me. And so that can be a deliberate strategy. Someone who's borderline might not know that it's a deliberate strategy. They might not be enacting that as a deliberate strategy. That might just be the way that they act. Like, I'm really into them at this moment. It's really, really intense.
So why are they acting like that?
I think it's a shift in their mood in that sense. So it's, you know, they feel good in the moment. They feel that way. They feel very high emotions.
So they feel very, you're saying they feel emotions and times very, very, very strong.
Exactly, yeah. It's almost a shift in emotion in that sense, a shift in affect.
So would it be fair to say that they are making an identity or making themselves feel anchored in the world via another person with whom they are really overwhelmed with love? Is that what we're talking about? I mean, why would you become so obsessed with somebody else that you would think that they were wonderful and they were brilliant and they would send to the universe? It's so big.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a good perspective on it. That yeah, they really do center the other person in that sense, and I think that's also the case with narcissists. That narcissists need sometimes what's called narcissistic supply. They need that validation from a lot of other people. Certainly, a romantic partner could be one of those people, and yeah, the borderline person is going to become really attached to someone in the same way. They need that person for their validation, and if they feel that they're not getting it, when they have kind of that shift, that's probably also why they express so much aggression and anger toward that same person.
So what is, I don't understand, what is it that makes the shift take place? They're utterly in love with the person. My understanding is that these kinds of women, it is mainly a female phenomenon, can very quickly flip into almost a different self. It's almost like a Jekyll and Hyde, where they absolutely hate and despise it. And it's almost like a psychotic episode. Everything is threatening, including that person. And then they just flip back into it. So what's the underlying dynamics of how that works?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't know why that switch occurs, and I'm not sure the extent to which we understand kind of the etiology of these personality disorders. Like, why does it happen? Certainly, there's a lot of, there's some research, I should say, in cognition, brain research on that, but I'm really not sure to what extent neuroscience, for example, is really good at explaining these personality disorders.
So, is there what is the problem? I mean, these people do like self-harm, don't they, and suicide is very elevated among them. So, what is the prognosis for these people? Is it pretty bad, or can it be cured?
Yeah, well, the prognosis for personality disorders across the board, particularly the cluster B disorders, is pretty much that they don't get cured. It's something that is a lifelong thing. So it's, therapy in general for anything, it's for depression or whatever, I mean, it doesn't seem to work that well as far as it goes. And for personality disorders, even worse. A lot of the time, individuals with these personality disorders, if they even go into therapy, it's because they've done something, put them there involuntarily. In the case of borderline, it could be something like self-harm, in the case of something like narcissism, ASD, crime. But yeah, I mean, they just continue that way, and there's even some indication, at least with something like ASPD, therapy can actually make those individuals worse. So treating someone like that, it's almost like maybe you can give them some coping strategies to realize like what they're doing and not do that. But I mean, I'm not super hopeful.
I spoke to somebody else who was saying what's happened with them is that at a very formative age, they've had inconsistent parenting. Which, on the one hand, the parents telling them they're wonderful and they're great, and on the other hand, the parents telling them they're dreadful and they're appalling and they're awful. And they can't cope with that at that very, very young age. They can't deal with that. It's too complicated and confusing. So they almost, this is where I get into poetic language, they're ashamed of the bad person, the bad thing, but they're not even sure who the good thing is because the parents are inconsistent. And so they essentially don't develop a proper self, or rather they split off into two kinds of self, the good and the bad self. And you have the good self, which is what you will see, and then occasionally, which will tell itself that it's wonderful and it's, narcissistic. But then sometimes the repressed bad self, which is basically a battlefield, will throw a tantrum and come out and feel utterly and then calm down again. I mean, does that make any sense to you, or is that just so much pop psychology?
Well, certainly there's a lot of psychodynamic theories that explain everything in the context of what happened in early childhood. As far as research is concerned, it's really difficult to know. We can look at correlations like, okay, they had this kind of childhood, there was some abuse and it was bad, and it's associated with this. But of course, this is confounded by genes as well, because we know, personality across the board, about 50% heritable, right? The 50-0-50 rule. So we have these, traits that are heritable in that sense. I don't know the extent to which it is really caused. And certainly you can't conduct experiments and say, yeah, this is caused by this. We can look at some associations. There's associations as well with attachment styles, anxious and avoidant attachment personalities, which also kind of makes you wonder, okay, is there a general kind of psychopathy underlying it, right? The P factor or something like that. It just makes individuals kind of more dysfunctional across the board. But I think, people should probably look more towards the heritability of it in that case, rather than looking exclusively at environmental causes, especially environmental causes in the family.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing was that I understand that when you get these pop psychologists on YouTube or whatever that talk about borderline personality disorder and female narcissism, they note that eventually it creates a sort of trauma bond. So the idea is that this guy, let's say, is invested in a relationship, he loves her because of all the good times, he's confused by her with bad times. Bad times result in, let's say, bonding session or whatever. And so you end up with this trauma bond. And so actually the argument that BPD is in a sense adaptive. It's a way of compelling a man through a complex means to be very, very strongly attached to you.
Yeah, absolutely, no doubt. From the evolutionary perspective, all of, these, what we call antisocial behavior, the personality disorders, they probably reflect something adaptive, kind of a niche strategy. Like, okay, if everyone behaved that way, it probably wouldn't work. But for, a small percentage of the population who's kind of acting out within the context of a broader society, yeah, these antisocial behaviors, pursuing fast life strategies, that sort of a thing, they can work. And I think that's kind of what's going on. And I think what you explained is very good there as well. That it's like, yeah, a really quick strategy, like, okay, I'm going to make this person fall in love with me really quick and attach to me. Especially if someone is more of a short-term strategist, fast life strategist. It's like, okay, you don't need to maintain a long-term relationship. You just need to hook that person
hook him in, get his gametes.
Exactly.
Steal his gametes.
Yep.
And then piss off.
Exactly.
And so that is, but also you want him around. You want him there to give you investment. And so you make him feel almost responsible via the way that you can internally help him through trauma or whatever, and then you've got him. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting because when we talk about in life history strategy, I mean, I assume my viewers are familiar with life history strategy by now. If not, please see Jolly Heretic Passage. But life history strategy, then it's the idea that the more K-oriented a society is, the more niche split it is, and the more niche split it is, then the more the weaker is the positive manifold between the different components of K. And so you'll get these anomalies whereby, for example, overall we would say Japanese people are more K treated than white people. But on some markers of K, like looking after animals or adopting foreign children, they are more African, but yet they're more K overall. So you've got this sort of paradox. Because you get that there, I guess, with these kinds of women. Do they have some dimensions on which they're quite K strategic?
That's a good question.
Correlate with intelligence, for example.
Yeah, I could only speculate that. I do think typically the personality disorders are on average associated with lower intelligence, the cluster B disorders. And but you do see kind of a split there, perhaps. You can find individuals with personality disorders, especially like narcissism or psychopathy. At high levels of success, they're overrepresented, but at low levels of success, they're also overrepresented. So the prisons are full of people like that, but also you might find a lot of CEOs or surgeons or something that kind of have those same traits. So it's kind of like
zero-sum game.
Yeah,
high risk,
high reward.
High risk, very high risk, very high reward. But if it goes wrong, it goes spectacularly wrong.
Yeah, and especially if you were to look just a few hundred years back, if you had a really highly antisocial strategy, you could be hung. You could just be taken out of the gene pool. Now society is a little bit more forgiving, but yeah, very high risk.
So these kinds of women would be these BPD kind of women. They'd have been like hanged with witches in the 17th century.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah.
But now they're free with weaker pressures and more liberal laws to operate their strategy. So how do the female narcissists, do they have high levels of social success as males do?
I'm not entirely sure if that's the case, but similarly, just like men in prisons, we see narcissism overrepresented, the dark traits. The same is true for women. If you look in female prisons, you also see much higher rates of narcissism, both as far as diagnosis with clinical narcissism and supplemental. So it could be the case that there's higher rates of narcissism with more successful women. I'm not entirely sure, but we do see the same pattern for the low performers. You have higher rates there.
So I've always found this with the what you call the grandiose narcissism. Is this the idea? How does this develop? I mean, I'm told that with vulnerable narcissism, it's just the idea that they're deeply insecure, and so they kind of create a false self, but they don't really feel that.
That sounds right.
And therefore sometimes they trigger to address the sort of emptiness and fear of abandonment they're very marked, and then they get angry as well with negative emotions or whatever. But it's the idea that the absolute grandiose narcissist, the sort of, the Donald Trump type or whatever, he just feels that he's brilliant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. I think that could be a distinction there. That to some extent, the grandiose narcissism they believe in, and there's kind of a paradox in narcissism that individuals simultaneously feel like they're really good. They're high performance. They're at the top. They should be appreciated, but that other people don't appreciate. and they feel shame for that. And I think you could see a distinction there where perhaps the grandiose feels that authentically a little bit more. The vulnerable narcissist, perhaps they feel more of that shame, where I'm unappreciated, but I should be, but people are not going to appreciate me, and so on.
So could the difference just be that the grandiose narcissist thinks he's great, well, the vulnerable narcissist thinks he's great?
Yeah, I wondered if that was where you might see expressions of that the grandiose narcissist doesn't see, that the vulnerable narcissist doesn't receive the kind of feedback that they expect from the world. So they receive more incongruent feedback, and that creates more shame. So they begin feeling like, yeah, I'm underappreciated, and then everyone really is underappreciating them in that sense. And so, yeah, they become more and more vulnerable. I
Isn't
wonder
there something of a paradox that a narcissist who has a very high opinion of themselves and thinks they're great would feel shame? Surely, I mean, I come from Finland, and it's stereotyped. I come from Finland, and it's stereotyped as being a very shame-oriented culture. And what that means in everyday life is that people are, they are very, very interested in and concerned about what foreigners think of them. And then one of the first things they'll ask you is, so, what do you think of Finland? and you know, they really want to know. And if foreigners don't like it,